Which Marvel trilogy is the best, and which one's the worst? Let's talk about it. What's up, Flick fans? Welcome back to the channel. The Guardians of the Galaxy universe is now complete. The culmination of that is out this weekend in Volume 3, but today we're talking MCU Trilogies, except I may be including one franchise with 4 movies. I know the Thor franchise has 4 movies, but I still kind of want to look at those first 3 and include it in this ranking. It would also make the ranking more fun. I thought about the Avengers movies and combining Infinity War and Endgame, but those are 2 really long movies to combine. I can't leave out Endgame, I can't leave out Avengers, so we're going to stick with the 6 that we have and worry about the Avengers some other day. But this is exciting. I've never done this before, so if you guys like the idea and you want to see more things like this, be sure to drop that thumbs up. It would help me feel better? I don't know.
I don't know.
At the bottom, unfortunately, we have Ant-Man. I thought Quantumania would be the movie to kind of take this up the list because I really enjoy the first Ant-Man. I think that movie is special. I believe it does everything it needs to do and more. Is it magnificent, a masterpiece? No, but it takes this short-statured superhero, because of his powers, not really, and turns him into a hilarious force of nature with a great supporting cast. Michael Pena is a standout, and honestly, I thought Yellow Jacket was a pretty good villain. Then you get into Ant-Man and the Wasp, and just a very forgettable story, some forgettable villainous aspects of that movie. Walton Goggins, why is he in there? I don't understand, but it did keep kind of that simplicity of the first, and you still have, the shrinking in front of normal objects. That's kind of the magic of Ant-Man. So not a great story, but you kept the magic. In Quantumania, you lose some of that magic because we're in the quantum realm, so we're not able to take advantage of the really cool special effects that we saw in the first 2 movies. Instead, we get some of the worst special effects we've ever seen in the MCU. That being said, I did find the story to be a little more interesting than Ant-Man and the Wasp, and this movie has Kang. Now, whether the future of the MCU is going to have Jonathan Majors as Kang, I don't know. I can't answer that question, but he was the highlight of this movie. So some really good aspects, but there's also kind of the silliness that goes a bit too overboard, and you don't have someone like a Michael Pena, and then, not everyone loves someone like,
My name is Darren!
I thought he was funny, but the humor struggled to get me invested, and like I said, the visual effects aren't good. So all in all, it's just an inconsistent, somewhat mediocre trilogy with a really good first movie. So congrats.
Thor! Without Love and Thunder.
I know Love and Thunder really continues Jane's storyline, but we're just talking about the first 3 movies here and how I considered this as a trilogy for so long, and it makes the list more okay? That being said, I think The Dark World's bad.
I'm just saying.
It's just boring. It's just really boring. I watched The Dark World, and I don't hate Thor and Jane's relationship. I don't hate Thor and Loki's relationship. I just think the story surrounding them is lame, and it's one of the worst villains we've ever seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But the first Thor, I think it's pretty good, right? It's not great by any means. It doesn't do what I think some of these other first films did for other individual heroes, but I think it does a good enough job. Kenneth Branagh is a solid director. Yes, there's a lot of Dutch angles in the first movie, but I believe they serve the story well, and at least it's one of the more distinct-looking Thor movies, as well as Asgard looking absolutely fantastic. I really emphasized ass in Asgard just now. But then you have Ragnarok, and Ragnarok is better than I think most of the movies on this list that we're talking about, but unfortunately, it's just kind of preceded by overall mediocrity, even though, again, I enjoyed the first Thor movie, but this is by far absolutely 100% the best movie in the trilogy, technically quadrilogy now. Taika Waititi does an amazing job. Look, say what you will about Love and Thunder, it didn't work as a whole. But Taika Waititi still has a really good distinct style, and I think the humor works way better in Ragnarok than it did in the movie that was, people just don't want to talk about. It also really nailed Hulk, and we don't talk about that much because it's a Thor movie, but that's the best we've seen Hulk. He's amazing in that film. I thought Ragnarok was great, but as a whole, it is lower down on this list. Let's move on to Iron Man, and Iron Man starts out with an absolute bang. The best first movie on this list so far, one of the best movies in the MCU. It's still top 10 for me. A fantastic origin. I think this works so well. Jon Favreau absolutely nailed the first movie. We know that. We don't have to talk about it. But the second film, it takes the quality and it just crushed it.
crushed it into little tiny bite-sized pieces.
It's not devastatingly bad, but when you have such a good origin in Iron Man and then you use the middle movie as a segue, and what I mean by that is we're basically saying, all right, we're gonna use this to introduce a lot of elements of the Avengers, and we're not gonna give you a compelling story. We're gonna give you 5 or 4 distinct stories in one movie. You're gonna pick and choose which one you respond to, but it's mostly just ushering in the big Avengers movie. That's what Iron Man 2 feels like. Sam Rockwell is great. I believe Whiplash as a villain is somewhat wasted. Don Cheadle does a nice job. There are some good elements, but overall, Iron Man 2, it just doesn't work. And then Iron Man 3, I've kind of come around on this movie. It took me a bit, right, because I was so devastated by the twist, but ever since we got Shang-Chi, I think that twist is better than it was. The cool thing about Iron Man 3 is it allows Tony Stark to kind of go on his own adventure without relying on the Iron Man suit until the third act when you have like 50 Iron Man suits and they just seem very expendable, right? He gets hit and then one explodes and then he goes into another one. I'm like, what? But I liked the idea of the Iron Man suit being this impenetrable force. So you don't really get that at the end of the movie. So the third act's kind of a bust. But prior to that, I've kind of come around on the fact that it's a really good story. All in all, the Iron Man trilogy, it's another one that's inconsistent, but I do feel better about it than I used to. That's why it's this high on my list. Spider-Man.
I want Spider-Man!
It's hard to put this third because I like all 3 of these movies. I think Homecoming is genuinely hilarious. I find the first act of this film when they're in high school getting the opportunity to act like kids, because that's what they are. That's what Peter Parker is. And that relationship, I understand some people don't like Ned. They don't think he's funny. Some people don't love Zendaya in this movie. I'm not the biggest fan of Zendaya in this movie. I think she doesn't really come around until Far From Home. That being said, with that minor issue, I don't have an issue with this story. I don't have an issue with the reliance on Iron Man. I actually find that relationship to be really compelling. And Michael Keaton crushes this movie. He is so good as Vulture. I think Homecoming is a great start to what ends up being a great trilogy because Far From Home, while not a fantastic movie, I do think it's really good. There's some really good elements in here. Jake Gyllenhaal steals the show as the villain. Mysterio is excellent. It's funny because you have a similar twist to Iron Man 3. I just think it's executed so much better in this movie. The one thing about these films is John Watts, his direction has never really stood out to me. I don't love the style. There's not really much style to it, but you get really compelling scripts and nice stories overall, so that works for me. Maybe not as funny as Homecoming. The humor didn't hit me as hard, but it still works. But yeah, No Way Home, baby. No Way Home, baby. I love it. I love it so much. I think it lacks the Sam Raimi style. Again, John Watts, he doesn't quite have that, but he knows how to handle his actors, and he knows how to bring out compelling emotions and dialogue. And sure, it's nostalgia. It's nostalgic. It's the nostalgia bait. It's just too much nostalgia. I have uppity. I actually have glasses.
Yeah, nostalgia.
Screw that, man. This is one of the best times in the theater you're going to have. It means a lot if you grew up with Tobey Maguire. It means a lot if you have this affinity for Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. I think all 3 are fantastic in this movie. Garfield may just steal the show, but Tom Holland's Spider-Man grows so much in this movie. Turns into the Spider-Man that we know and love. And the villains, Willem Dafoe. I love this film. I think this is a great trilogy. It deserves to be higher on this list. Unfortunately, we have 2 that are better. And number 2. It's Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's hard for me not to put this at number 1. I have an explanation. I'll talk about it, but I don't have a huge issue with any of these movies. My least favorite, and you saw my ranking, I have a YouTube short on my channel that ranks the films, but Volume 2 is just the one that works the least for me. I think the overall story is a little all over the place at times, and the humor, it's less funny than Guardians 1, but there are so many more elements that are just as, if not more so, compelling. Kurt Russell is a great villain. I really enjoyed the presence of Ego. Chris Pratt rocks it in this movie. The introduction of Mantis, the emotions. Everyone talks about the ending, and the ending is just magnificent with Yondu. But throughout the film, you're just filled with joy, and I think that's the beauty of James Gunn. Then you have Guardians of the Galaxy. We'll talk about Volume 1 first. Volume 1 It started it all. It has forever been one of my favorite movies in the MCU, and what an introduction to a group of heroes that not a lot of people knew anything about. I knew some stuff about them. I was familiar with the comics, but this movie opened up a whole new universe, a whole new group of characters, and it was brilliantly done. But to cap it off in the way that they did with Guardians 3, with all of the emotions and, a lot going on in this story, but the way that they handled it and a beautiful culmination of especially Rocket Raccoon's storyline and how they ended it and the music. And I was filled with joy. It was so heartfelt. I felt so kind of rejuvenated after walking out of the theater. It's going to be hard for Marvel to top this over the next couple of years because it's going to be hard to feel the emotions that I felt in this movie. That being said, Volume 3, it nails it, and I thoroughly enjoyed this trilogy as a whole. James Gunn, I am so excited to see what he does next. But number one, holding a special place in my heart, it's almost like Guardians 3 came out, everybody's like, oh, it's the best MCU trilogy, and I'm sitting here like, but Captain America's really good. And I get if you're going to argue Guardians, understandably so. Honestly, I don't have a lot of rebuttal if you say Guardians is number one. That's how good both of these trilogies are. My thing about putting Captain America at number one is I have the first Avenger over Volume 2, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and I have the other two movies in the trilogy, Winter Soldier and Civil War, over both of the other Guardians movies. And I get it. If you love Guardians 3, I completely understand why, but I am just a sucker for the Russo brothers mixed with Captain America, mixed with this style, mixed with this story. It all comes together for me so beautifully, and Winter Soldier for a long time, up until recently, was my number one Marvel movie. Civil War is in my top 5. I'm sorry I hit the mic while I was talking. Seriously, the impact that Winter Soldier had on me, seeing this spy espionage thriller in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I didn't know a lot about the Russo brothers, to be honest with you. I don't think anyone did. They didn't know they were capable of this. Yeah, you can talk about what they've done outside the MCU. I'm talking specifically in this universe. It works so well, man, and they nailed it. They nailed the tone, they nailed the vibe, they nailed the emotions. But then Civil War, it brings in all of these other heroes. It feels like an Avengers movie, yet it still has the heart, and it has that devastating moment with Iron Man at the end of the film. And I think the final battle is just as good, if not better, than the airport battle. Yeah, but Austin, the first Avenger, it's not as good as the other two. And I get that. It's not. But I think the first Avenger may be the most underrated movie in the MCU. What a great introduction. Yeah, they highlight through some really integral moments, but I actually thought this captured the style, it captured the time period, and I think it's a really good film. So 2 and 1 for me, Guardians and Captain America, very close. I'm giving the edge to Cap right now, but I've only seen Guardians 3 one time. I've seen Winter Soldier 15 times.
I'm a psycho.
But of course, shout out to the Avengers movies. They would obviously be very high on this list. If we're doing quadrilogies, they're number one. Thor is last. This video is pointless if you don't leave your comments down below. This video is pointless if I don't have your all's ranking. Thanks so much for being here. I still want to do a spoiler review for Guardians. If you want to see that, let me know. If you want to see me rank all of the Marvel movies, all the MCU movies, Marvel will be a long time. Let me know that as well. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you soon.